Ah, welcome. I'm so glad you could join us. Please come in. Your presence honors us. Here at the Mr. Homemaker Podcast, we share our stories and challenges, collect the best expert advice, and offer one another support as we learn to manage our households. Your perspective and contributions will be very valuable. And just in time, today's discussion is about to begin. It is my pleasure to present Mr. Homemaker.
Thank you for joining me as we continue our discussion on cultivating healthy and fulfilling marriages and family lives by better preparing to be husbands and fathers. Last week we surveyed the landscape through the lens of economics, particularly how adolescents and young adults inadvertently adopt life plans that sabotage their own long-term desire for a healthy marriage and family life. In this episode, we will focus on what young men can do to prepare themselves today to be good partners and fathers in the future. Many of the systemic obstacles to a successful marriage and family life are rationalized by insisting that neither a young adult themselves nor their parents or mentors can predict how their lives will unfold and what they will want when they are older. Specifically, according to today's prevailing wisdom, no one can know what their domestic role and responsibilities will be until after they get married and decide then, based on their spouses and their own talents and interests. Therefore, young adults should postpone preparation for domestic life and spend a decade or more focusing on themselves, their education, career, individual goals, and desires. For young adults mature and wise enough to recognize the pitfalls of this approach to life, as we detailed in our last episode, the question remains, how should young adults spend their late teens and early 20s if they know they do want to prepare themselves for a successful marriage and family life in their late 20s? To outline the answer to this question, today we'll ask ourselves, what advice would we give to young adults to develop healthy mindsets and skills in each of the dimensions of marriage and family life that we've explored so far in Season 2. Suppose we took a weekend away from our children to vacation in scenic Rhode Island, and by some wrinkle in the space-time continuum, we found ourselves stepping into the elevator of our hotel today, but stepping out into the year 2032. Enjoying a drink at the hotel bar, we strike up a conversation with a pair of newlyweds, a lovely couple named Jack and Jill, both 28 years old and both excited to be starting their lives together and starting their family. They confide in us, however, that they feel unprepared, realizing they spent the first 10 years of adulthood developing themselves as individuals, but spending no time whatsoever preparing for domestic life. They ask us to travel back to present-day 2022 before they've even met and help them each navigate a decade of adulthood with the goal of being as prepared as possible for a healthy marriage and family. This is quite a challenge, and meeting it will take more than one episode. But fortunately, we have a little help to get the ball rolling. We're joined today by our podcast's very first guests, who longtime listeners will remember from Season 1, Week 4, as the King and Queen of Clean. Kristen's two closest childhood friends who have since gotten married and, over 15 years, had 2 children of their own. Welcome back, Alison and Jeffrey. Alison and Jeffrey, thank you for being on our show.
It's wonderful to be here.
Thanks for having us.
People have heard your voices before, but they have not seen you on camera. So it's like,
That's true.
yeah, it is a treat.
So, one of the key functions of a family is to be a place where people can share, like without having to do transactions and like bargain and make contracts. It's just we all pool, as a family, we pool our resources, like our financial resources and our material resources. So like in our family, we have a car. All the members of the family benefit from the use of that vehicle. It's used to meet everyone's needs. We don't have to like, nobody has to pay anybody to drive them anywhere, kind of stuff. And same with like salaries, like it all just goes into a bank account that is used to pay for everybody's needs. So the question would be, on those dimensions of like financial and material resource management, not like the obtaining of it, but like how those things are managed in a way that like benefits the family. Can you think of any like common mistakes or areas of conflict in a marriage or a family when it comes to like financial and material resources?
Yes.
You didn't have to jump so fast. Okay, you want to start? Go ahead, Kristen.
I do.
Yeah.
I think the concept of mine and yours in a marriage doesn't work. And I think it's like we have come to the approach of we pool what we have, right? Like we make money, and it's not like I make this and you make that, and therefore you have access to that and I have access to this. And it's also not like, well, I make more money, so I get to make more of the choices. It's like we look at things as ours, and we look at how we, like our roles, it's a collective to being a family. So whether, like when you are working or whether you're at home, like we have to all play these roles. So I think like some of our friends are very much like, I make this and you make this. And I think that also sets it up for being able to like push the eject button real fast, right? Like, nothing's commingled. Yep. I don't know. Do you guys like? How do you do your finances? And are you guys
it's
just
funny
kind of
we
like?
talked about that walking today. We said about. She said, "Oh, we went shopping." She's like, "You bought my birthday gift." Like she bought her own birthday gift. I said, "But it's all coming out of the same credit card. Like we use a credit card, your credit card, mine, and it's all getting paid out of the same thing."
Right.
We're the same way. Our money is collectively. It just is there. It's not who makes more money, who does.
Right.
You know, and that's how we just.
But you're right, a lot of our friends are not like that. We're probably one of the very few that are like that, which whatever, everyone has different things, but I feel the same way. It's very like, oh, my wife pays the mortgage.
Some of the members are budgeted on what they're allowed to have. Which, you know, we...
Yeah, someone told me recently I loaned my wife money because she didn't have enough for this, and I was like, okay.
Like with interest? Like
does
she have to pay it back?
No, I felt bad. I didn't want her, and he was nice about it. He's like, I didn't want her to feel bad, so I was like, here's $200, go get what you need to get. And we're lucky that we
and that might work for them, but I just feel like then that causes conflict.
We were lucky to be on the same page with that, because it wasn't even something that we actually talked about. It just was like, all right, now we have a bank account.
Some people have their separate bank accounts, like, you know,
Yeah.
And, you know, when we got married, at the beginning, it was like I had a certain bank, she had a certain bank, but then we're like, all right, time to bring them together.
Well, we kept that for a while because I kind of wanted us to have two banks just in case. You never know what happens in the economy or whatever.
But it wasn't my...
But it wasn't one or the other. It was, all right, we're going to take...
The mortgage out of this bank.
Mortgage out of this bank, car payments out of this bank. Just.
But it wasn't like your car payments coming out of the bank.
Yeah. I just think it's like a bad dynamic to set up. I mean, I will say like it's a little less romantic on the date side because like it's not like, oh, you're taking me out on a date.
Well, we still pretend.
Still feel that way.
Still pretend like I still like. Here's my card. Even though it's still
I do that too.
And it's hard to surprise because you're gonna see the bill anyway.
Like,
you know, like
don't look at the Amazon account for a while. Something's coming.
Thank you, by the way.
Christmas time, 2-month hiatus. Don't look at any bills. Just let them out.
Well, so does anybody? And I don't think I do know anybody who does the like separate finances. And they've like explained it to me, and I was like, "Oh, that kind of makes sense." Like I like see the appeal of it. Like I don't, other than the idea of like I just want what's mine to be mine. Like I don't know, are we missing something? Are we like not giving that enough credit? I'm just trying to like think the other side of it.
Some people, it's fine for them. Like it's not. I don't think it's a negative thing in their eyes. I think people just think this is how we do it. Her car payment comes out of her paycheck. My car payment comes out of mine. I know somebody that does like she pays half the mortgage. I pay the other half, and.
Right.
That just, I don't know, it's odd to me, but for them it just happened to work out. I don't know how it was, how they decided on that.
But I also think there's some friends that have spending problems, so it's a way to
that's true.
minimize the over expensing, you know.
It's almost like a firewall.
Right, you can buy all that stuff, but you better be able to give me.
Because you do like to spend, you sort of have to.
That's true.
You know, I can't take the chance of having all of our money on the table where it's like, here, this is a portion that, I don't love it, but this is what we can decide on.
Right.
And, you know.
Okay, so
Well,
I
I
mean
think
that's a
that's
plausible explanation, like that why that might be
Yeah.
relevant, like
Yeah.
or useful.
So you
Because
still
we
almost
both
feel-
just happen to be on the same page with it, right? We're not going to spend this because we're doing that,
Right.
But
Yeah, I
you're
feel
right.
like
If one
we
of
have-
us was just like, no, I'm
and
still
we
going
don't
to buy
judge
all
one
the
another.
things.
Like if we like, you just bought yourself a pair of shoes, yeah, like or you went and got yourself a shirt. I know that she works her butt off. She knows I worked my butt off. It's our money, and
But
So
and for big things we talk about, like
Yes.
he wants to buy a new treadmill, so he wouldn't just go buy a treadmill
Yes,
without
it
talking
would be
about
that.
it. But
Right.
we would agree to do that kind of thing. But I don't know that we have a number on, all right, we can't spend this much unless we ask the person.
Right.
But I think it's just
it just
something
organically
we
like
know.
happens.
Yeah, I think it's interesting too because like that I think both of us in our relationships have like we have similar spending like proclivities
Habits.
or
Yeah.
profiles, right? Like
Yeah.
neither of us like likes big tech gadgets. Neither of us like is big spend. Like I'm always like,
We're
I
not
gotta
real
be careful. I don't
impulsive,
like buy
yeah.
a billion gadgets. Like it's just not a thing. Like I'm very like cautious when it comes to what we do, and I feel like you are too. But if you did have someone that maybe like two people
Yes.
very different, that might make sense to
Yeah.
keep things separate.
All right.
Yeah.
So that was a lot of financial stuff. Is there anything we can think about in terms of people who do a better or worse job handling, like things you've purchased, right? Like the things you own, like the things you've already obtained, either individually or as a couple or as a family. Like we've talked before about like maintenance of things. Like maybe we're not doing a good enough job maintaining things so they last longer or
Right.
whatever. Like we kind of just like use things until they break and then we get a new thing.
Yeah. I think that's one thing in the material realm, right? Is that we believe in using things until they absolutely cannot work anymore. Like I'm not like I just want a new TV because it has a new feature.
That's true.
Like I'm gonna keep this TV until it dies. Then I'm gonna ask my dad to fix it. It's gonna last
And
for
when
another
that
5
doesn't-
years,
and that-
and then, but like because
Yeah.
but that's also because for me, both because I am like fiscally, you could say frugal. But also because like I don't like waste and I don't like things just going into landfills, so I'm like I
Yeah.
will do everything I can to fix and use what I have. But there are other people that like are like, well, I want the latest phone because like it's
And
got
I'll
new
like hand
features
this one
and
on to
like
somebody else.
and
maybe,
so
yeah.
we are similar in that too, that we're like from a material perspective. But I do think like we always joke, and I feel like you guys are like my parents in this, that like my parents take care. You would like you look at my parents' pots and pans and you would think they have never cooked in them, and they've owned them for 20 years, right? They're just and where we're like, well, like we clean it, it's good, and we put it away, but like I'm not like getting like polishing it so it looks perfect, and I do think that we probably could do a better job with that, but I don't, that's just.
Also, like, I feel like there's some maintenance stuff that we've never done. I don't know. I would love if you guys. I have a feeling you're like, gonna be like, oh, I have some thoughts. But it's like it's kind of in the same arena as like cleaning, where it's like we've never like polished a table,
That's not
or
true.
like
You've never polished.
I've
a
never
table.
seen you polish a table. Are you polishing tables when I'm not around? Oh.
I got my pledge.
Or like varnishing things, or like
Or like my sneakers,
repainting
right? Like my
a
sneakers. I
dresser.
don't like clean.
Dirty.
Like they just get dirty and then they get dirty and then it's
Same.
done. I feel like you probably like you
So
see
he
a
cleans his
stuff.
sneakers and washes them, but then you also purchase new sneakers. And you run, you wear them a lot, it's fine. But it is interesting. You clean them, you make sure they're always... I wear them until I'm like, oh, well, that's...
Or like dress
It's a
shoes.
lost
Like
hope
I
now.
never
I
get them
should go buy a new
polished.
pair.
Yeah.
Right, no. We don't.
Yeah. I just like I wear dress shoes and I'm like I can't. These are
Yeah.
hideous. I have to replace
Right.
them instead of like I should get them polished. I should have them resold. I should whatever.
Right.
But I also think that's a product of like we're not buying top of the line things
Well, that's the
typically.
thing. I'm also
Right,
not buying
right.
$100
No,
pair of shoes. I'm buying
Yeah.
$25
Amazon
pair of shoes that
Right.
They're going to fall apart.
Right.
He
That's
does
interesting.
polish furniture, though. So actually, he just did that the other day. It's funny that
and
you
he
said
was
that.
like, "What?
Why does the table look greasy?" We're like, it's shiny.
Right.
It's not
Get your hands off of it."
It's like, but I can't see all the fingerprints
Right.
and scratch marks I left. Like exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
But that actually is something I've wondered about from a material, and I think I'm getting closer to this, but I'm not sure where the right line is of investing in things that are quality and then taking care of them versus like so for instance, like we bought a couch, right? And it was like for a couch relatively inexpensive because of the time and phase of life we're in, where I'm like, we have little kids that
mess
like
it up. Yeah.
from the kitchen walk right into the living room, hands on them, whatever.
Although
But like I
mean,
do.
Yeah. When we're not fast enough to stop.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do wonder if, like, they're like shoes, for instance, like, should we be buying $200 pair of shoes? Like, will that last you longer? What is the
We do
economic
talk about
return?
things like that because I think typically we both spend less on it. So if there's something we're like, all right, we need this for the house, should we do the extra $100 one because we think it'll last longer? But I feel like we spend a lot of time making that decision.
Yes.
Well,
And
because
then,
you're sitting there, ultimately, you don't want to spend more money.
Right.
Like, that's because you just...
but then you're going to get frustrated when the
But-
cheaper thing
Right.
doesn't
So
work as
do you
well.
spend
Yeah.
do you get the insurance on whatever
Right.
you buy? It's a couch. Do I really need the insurance?
I know.
But
Then you get red wine on it.
Right.
And that's
your
like,
kids
you're
decide
thankful.
that they're just gonna free for all over it with everything,
Right.
and now you have the insurance that
Yeah.
will cover damages to that. But at that time, do you want to spend that extra $200 for that insurance that
When you
nothing's
have little
happened?
kids. And
I
So-
feel that way, like we did with the washing machine, right? Like we could have bought a much less expensive washing machine, but you were like, well, if we get it from the local place, they have like they do the service on it. It's like known to be good, and so we spent the extra money on that.
Yeah.
But anyway, just like kind of thinking from that perspective of like what your first of all, just like I would love people's answer as to like what is the breaking point, right? Of like the break even point of like it was worth spending this extra money,
Yeah.
Yeah.
because it like works, or is that just all?
Well, again, and so this is a little bit foreshadowing, but I think this is a good place to start bringing it up, which is if you have the habit and skill to do like maintenance on your own stuff, like to be a handyman or like fix,
Right.
or like mend
Yeah.
clothing or
Right.
like whatever. Like if you have those skills, then like it's like stitch and time saves 9 kind of stuff, and it's like a lot of
Oh yes, that
very like
that phrase.
it's like there's a lot of things that are like user maintenance that can be done. Like we talked about last, it's like if you don't know how to do anything, you're like, I either can use this until it doesn't work anymore and then throw it away and get a new one, or I can hire some electrician to come in to like tighten the panel on the outlet because I don't know how to do that. So like
I
that's the
think
thing
my
that people can
immediate
do.
thought is typically like, all right, we got to call somebody, I have to hire somebody. And some things he'll be like, I can fix that, and I'm
Right.
like,
But-
oh,
or I
but can
can't.
you? Or he'll say he can't. But I think my initial thought is, I can't fix this. I don't have time. I
Right.
can't do it. We have to have somebody else do it.
But regards to maintenance, though, I don't think there's an agenda to say, now we have these products that we have purchased or that we have in our house that there's a schedule of maintenance for it. I
Right.
think it's
Like every
to the-
6 months you're supposed to do
unfortunately,
whatever,
it's either,
yeah.
Until you
wow,
know,
it's
oh,
really
I should have
dirty.
done that.
Wow,
Yeah.
it's really dirty. I got to take care of it. Or something's not working right with it. Got to take care of it.
Things like
where
the pipe or our hose spigot froze last season. Neither of us thought, oh, we should have, like, to maintain it, we should have,
Let
we
it
had to
drip.
winterize it.
Yeah,
We didn't
yeah,
know,
what
so
do
then
we
we
do?
had a whole issue. So now we know, we have a sign everywhere, a
Right.
reminder in my phone.
Those are
November
right.
1st, we better,
The fridge the other day, actually, even though it tells you, we ignore it.
Right.
Change your water filter, and I was like, oh, that's a good point. Like
And I see it, and I'm like, all right, tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm going to look
you
at
know,
that tomorrow.
where
Yeah.
there is no
Schedule, but
schedule,
you're right, there
which
should be.
would be
But
helpful.
that's a good point too of what we've talked about, which is like so one in your family, making sure, like I feel like we're in an era of society where we're like parents take care of the household and the things, and kids, you go play and do activities. But like there is a point at which like we, for a long time in society, it was like your dad's
Kids have to do
fixing the
chores.
sink, you're right along with him.
Yes.
Maybe first you're handing him a tool, and the next time you're learning how to do that. And we don't do that
You're
anymore.
right, that's a very good point.
And so like when you go to own a home, like you probably should have known to like winterize your
Right.
pipes, but like I don't know that either, like because my parents took care of that stuff, and so now we're learning lessons in a weird way, as opposed to like coming into owning a home and like kind of having, like I feel like we're starting from scratch of like, okay, so we're homeowners.
What do you do now?
What do we like?
Yeah.
Do we have like, when do we change the like air filters, and when do we do this?
I have to
and
call my mom because I'm not sure
Right,
when
right,
to do
right.
it. Like, you
Right,
don't
yeah.
think, like,
So it's interesting that like we don't my parents were very focused on like get a good education, do extracurriculars, like live your life and enjoy being a kid. I think there's a good piece to that, but there is a portion of that we miss out on, which is like understanding how to take care of these kinds of things as you grow up.
So for all of that whole set of thoughts, is there anything that, one, you would advise an 18-year-old Jack or 18-year-old Jill, hey, here's something I'm not good at, but if I went back to being 18, here's something I would start learning this now, or start thinking this way now when it comes to those things? Either of them, both of them?
I think it probably depends on their home life, what it was growing up, because I would probably say make sure you're hanging around your mom and dad, seeing how they're doing stuff around the house, just so that it becomes second nature to you.
Yeah.
If that's the type of household they have.
Well, actually, I think I'm gonna fill in some blanks
Yeah.
about their life story,
Okay,
right?
great.
So like they're going off to college. they're not going to be around their parents and at home, right? So like they're going to be living in a dorm, for the next 4 years. Again, they don't know each other yet. They're
right.
But so they're college kids, right? Like they kind of missed that opportunity to be 12 or 14 or 15, like and to be like shadowing somebody who's doing that. So, like, do you think in your college years, or like when you're out of college and like you have your own apartment, like it's too early to start taking the time to learn that stuff? I feel like basically we didn't do that, and the question is like, would it have been worth it when we were younger and single to take the time then to say like, you know what, I'm like thinking ahead, and I'm mature and wise enough to realize I should start preparing as a single person for being a homeowner.
No.
I feel like I would like to tell them that. Like, yes, if I was sitting here, I'd be like, oh, yes, I would like to tell them, all right, Jack, you better know how to do laundry, fix this, do this. Both of you should know how to do all these things. But I also think society isn't really like that. I think as a society, everyone's like, oh, well, I'm just going to call somebody to fix that because, you can Google whoever and you can find somebody to come fix things. So ideally, yes, you would tell them, learn all these things so that you know it and you're ready.
But it's almost like you're saying, it almost sounds like Kristen's saying, even ideally, she's like, no, ideally don't waste your time.
Don't even worry about it?
I'm saying like either you would have done that when your parents owned a home, but from the time you're in college and then renting an apartment, you have a landlord that's in charge of, like, there's no logical reason to learn that. And what would you do? Be like, hey, landlord, like, we should winterize the pipes.
Yeah.
Like, that's just not
that is interesting,
what it is.
I think it might even go more of understand taking responsibility for their money first, because they're not gonna appreciate
That's true.
the things, the values of things until they're paying for it. So if mom and dad are paying for everything, think about it. You're not gonna, as a kid right now, you get a bike. My child throws her bike to the floor and doesn't care, but you're like,
Right.
I just spent that.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
right.
So we do that now
until so maybe as the 18-year-old of saying, hey, listen, you're going to college, pick up a part-time job while you're balancing school, because unfortunately, yes, school is important, but life is also going to be crazy for you going forward. So yes, I want you to focus, but pick up a couple hours just to start getting responsibility.
Yeah.
So that you can start owning your money, so that you can purchase. So say they do want to buy a very fancy phone, they're going to start taking care of that phone, or it's not mom and dad's that they're going to be like, yo, family plan, get me another phone. Those things, because you're right, until that time from 18 and college dorm life to an apartment with a landlord, it's not going to really make sense for them to care so much, because someone's always going to be there taking care of it, because that's how it is. Until you start owning and paying for things, you're like, wait, I now you own your house, you're like, wait,
I'm gonna YouTube a video on how to fix this.
And it starts to go things like, you're like, I want my front yard to look decent, so I'm gonna go mow my lawn. I want my shutters falling down. Well, that doesn't look good. I'm paying for this house. I want to go fix it, or figure out how to fix it, or call someone to fix it. So I think it goes to that.
So going back, I have a question. You're talking about 18, like going into college, all that. So thinking of your girls and like when they're going to school, how do you think as a parent you prepare them? You're going to prepare them for that. Like, one, do you think you're going to like encourage them to get part-time jobs? Are you going to give them a credit card with some kind of how do you envision setting that up?
The work field that I'm in and working with young people, and from high school into college, I think it's so important. First of all, work ethic from the beginning. I mean, I have 15-year-olds I start with, and incredible to watch that growth. And I've watched someone who's had first-time job, and I think it builds their character. It builds work ethic is a huge problem now. I think people use it as an excuse, but it's like, they don't want to work. They don't want to. I think they take pride in like first-time job. Getting a paycheck, then having that money to say what I can do with this. Yes, they can go spend it and blow it on this. I think they have
to be taught to respect that job.
No, of course.
I think that's part of the problem.
But I think ideally, I think it would be important to start them as young as possible. If they're able to. I'm not saying give them 40 hours, not that you can work that, but 40 hours, a 15-year-old, but give them a responsibility, so that it starts them young, so that it's something that they always know,
Right.
like, so it's like, all right, so I have a job now, and getting the taste of money to understand, like, wait, I'm making money, I can buy myself these things, and then it starts, I guess, the whole natural part of taking care of their stuff. I mean, not everybody perfectly is going to do that, but you're going to take more responsibility of appreciation of your stuff if you're paying for it,
Thank you to our patrons who make Mr. Homemaker possible, particularly Cassandra, Colin, and Mary Jo and Paul. And thank you to our podcast audience who helped us reach the 2,000 download milestone this past week. Please join the conversation in our growing communities on both YouTube and Reddit. To help us reach more couples trying to navigate these challenging times, please like, subscribe, and share this episode with your spouse, relatives, and friends. So, again, we're thinking ahead to you're forming a family in particular. Like, so you're thinking ahead for these two to when they are married and start having kids, because we already know that they want to get married and they want to have kids. So, like, we're not worrying about, like, well, maybe you won't want to have kids. Like, we know that they will, right? So we're eliminating that uncertainty. So one of the most fundamental things that a family needs to, like, be able to, functions it needs to be able to perform is to meet everyone in the family's physiological needs, right? So having, air and water, sort of like, there's not, I feel like that's sort of like real, like, unless
Real
we're
basic.
living in the wilderness, that we can skip past that.
Yeah.
But there's, like, food, shelter, and clothing. So, like, on the food front, right? Like, other than you have a job that you earn money, you use the money to buy food. Like, then what do you do with it? And, like, are you going to be a household where, we eat McDonald's every day for dinner? Or it's like, do you want to have organic, free-range, grass-fed, everything, da-da-da-da-da? And, like, are you going to be a Blue Apron kind of household? Or are you going to be like, oh, no, like, we are our own culinary masters, So there'd be, like, a range of lifestyle issues, and the question would be, what, if any, preparations should young adults be making so that they're prepared to, like, meet the needs of their family as they're forming a family in the future?
Well, so first of all, I think, like, typically for the food piece, right? Stereotypically, it almost always falls to the wife. So like it is a more common skill for women to learn. And I think most women, like, grow up, their moms, like, just kind of, like, teach you along the way, right? But I will say, if you're a dude and you want to score a hot chick,
Learn to cook.
learn to cook.
Yeah.
If I was on a date with a guy, like, after a couple months, and, like, he was like, come over, I'm gonna cook you a dinner, I'd be like, and it was good, I'd be like,
Great.
wow, keeper, right? Like, that is huge.
Yeah.
That's always in the men's magazines of, like, ways to really
Yes.
lock it in with a girl is, like, cook her dinner.
Yeah, like, I'm not saying you have to be a chef, although some of my girlfriends are like, oh, my husband, like, okay, so there's this couple in our neighborhood, they're older than us, they have kids, like, in high school, and, like, and the husband is, like, I mean, he's a surgeon, right? Like, he's like a big deal, but he is the cook of the house. She's like, oh yeah, like, when we have people over, like, we were over there to, like, do this event, and he's like, can I make you guys, like, do you want nachos, do you want this, do you want that? I was like, oh my, like, this is amazing, like, the fact that he's just, like, doing this, right? So I would say, like, you want to score some points, like, that's like a great thing to know how to do.
I think that's a staple for both
people learning how
to be able to do
cook.
I'm not saying, like you said, it doesn't have to be a gourmet meal, but to be able to,
Even though mine are.
Yes.
Some people have to learn how to cook because.
but so that there's no,
I know.
just because I know, like, for instance, your father never cooked.
No.
He would not be
burn bread.
He wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
So if it was left to her father, he wouldn't have been able to provide
Feed me.
for the family at that
No,
time.
like,
And again,
or we'd have McDonald's.
or
because,
have to
you
be
know.
those alternatives because of that.
I think also if you don't know, 10 years ago they didn't know each other who they would marry. So yes, if you know, okay, I'm going to marry someone that's going to do this, I don't have to learn it, but you don't know. So you really have to be self-sufficient.
Well, so we could, in this hypothetical scenario, we could, for their sake, on their behalf, we can say, one of you is going to specialize in this, and the other one's not going to worry about it. Because
But I think basic skills, regardless, are necessary.
Okay, so
Boiling a pot of water, throwing pasta in it. Like
just because future-wise, even if Jill is more capable of cooking. If Jill has a great career and isn't home in time, and then you have kids and someone needs to make them dinner and you want it to be healthy, and I think Jack has to have some skills, or vice versa, whatever it is. I think it's important for them to be able to.
But you said that your dad could not cook, but did he grill? Or was not, that wasn't even
to pieces, but he
well,
really couldn't.
No, but your mother would
Sometimes
prep it. No, but your mother prepped it all. So if it was
but if he
grilling,
made chicken,
he would put it on there a little
crispy.
You're right. The barbecue chicken was always crispy.
Well, because it's interesting, right? Because I think about that, like, I feel like stereotypically, like I have no idea how to grill. I don't know how to turn the barbecue on.
I've learned it. I've tried to teach myself, but I'm nervous about it.
Yeah. Like, I'll cook anything in the kitchen, but I won't grill. I feel like if you want to stereotype things,
well, we
the
don't
guy
have
should know how to grill.
We could,
the
but we
girl
don't have to,
should know how to, like,
bake.
And
I feel like men can't make a pie or a cake.
Can you make a pie or a cake?
Which is
yes. Recipes.
But we also.
I'm not afraid of a recipe, so that's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like with cooking. You can just play around with stuff.
Yeah, see,
with baking, it's a recipe you have to go by because you don't put enough of the baking soda.
Right.
You don't do this.
It's like a science project.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has to be properly measured.
Yeah, I'm not winging baking.
Right.
Yeah,
but
I'm very comfortable cooking anything that I can wing.
Yeah, he wants to make it up.
Yeah, see, I can't. I'm
so
incapable of doing that.
She made a chili last week and was like, "This is terrible."
I'm like, "We're gonna have to throw it all out. It's gross." Yeah. And he's like, "What?" I'm like,
so I opened up the cabinet.
But I followed a recipe.
I threw a little bit of this. I threw a little bit of that.
And it was delicious, and I was like, I did all the prep and the cooking and the chopping in there, and you threw in some spices, and all of a sudden it's delicious.
Yeah, it's like,
so it happens to be a good compliment. I guess.
Well, that's the whole thing. Like, that's ideal, right? Like, from the economics perspective, if two people have totally, if you have the same skill set and you have the same weaknesses, you're no better off being married than single.
Right.
The whole idea is to have, like, I have a strength that is a weakness for you, and you have a strength that's a weakness for me. We're both better off being married. So, like, even if within the cooking realm we can break that down and say, like, men should be able to grill, make breakfast, and that's it. That's what I do.
Yeah. My dad made a lot of breakfast for dinner. Like, lunches, if it was when my mom would work late nights at the hospital, my dad was like, it was always like, pancake for dinner night. You're like,
Yeah, see, and I can do that. I'm good. There you go.
Okay, so up to this point we've been talking about material resources and managing those for the family, and specifically talking about, like, food. That got a lot of attention. And we've already talked about, like, maintenance of a shelter and, like, other belongings, like those kinds of material resources. Now, the next sort of dimension within that, the next level of needs is not physiological needs, but safety needs. So a family needs to make sure that all of the members of that family are having their safety needs met, and those are security and health, like, from disease, right? Like, so you're not worried about getting sick, you're not worried about getting injured, or if you are sick or injured, there's people to take care of you, and you're not worried about, like, threats from, like, violence, right? Like, you're not worried about like, you're safe in your home, that kind of thing. So can we think about any one for both people as you're a young adult and you're thinking ahead to, like, I'm going to get married and have a family one day? Is there anything that you can start doing before you're married to be effective, providing, like, a safe, healthy, secure environment for your family?
That's hard because I feel like you should just have that for yourself. So like, I don't know.
Yeah. You know why I think this is hard? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I think the reason that this is hard for us is because we all grew up with those things as fundamental and
that's a good point.
They just existed, right? Like, I never worried about that. And so I think there are people that grew up in environments where they did not have those things, like security, health, and safety in their physical space.
They have to actually give it thought as to how am I going to do this differently when I grow up.
Right. I take it for granted. That's why, like, when you asked me about this last time, I was like, I don't have any thoughts about, like, or even my basic needs, right? I was like, they were always met.
That's what I mean. You should just do that for yourself, and then you'll do it for your family. But
there are people that don't grow up
that didn't have it that way. Yeah.
Well, let's maybe take a twist on it, right? Like, in our daily lives, those are things we've taken for granted. But, like, even today at brunch, we were talking about, like, we just finished National Preparedness Month. September is annual National Preparedness Month, and talking about, like, Hurricane Ian made landfall, and, like, we've been seeing in the news, like, how all those things you take for granted can be taken away. And, like,
How do
you
you
can lose
prepare
power.
for it?
You can
Yeah.
lose the ability to communicate. You can,
Yeah.
you can't just like dial 911. An ambulance is there in 5
Right.
minutes. It's like that's
Right.
all gone.
That's all gone. Yeah.
And so, what do you think the responsibilities of a young man and young woman who are thinking ahead to having a household, like being prepared for emergencies? Just trying to like
Well,
trying to turn that
like
up, yeah.
So for instance, like we, it was always we were gonna have a house alarm. That was just little things of like, let's alarm our house, and even though we're not really good at it, come up with the game plan of if it goes off, what are we gonna do? What are the steps we're gonna do? Family wise, our kids know that, God forbid something happens in that house, our meeting point,
It's the
mailbox.
mailbox.
That is just the goal is to get to the mailbox.
I think it's
So-
also important for you to discuss with your spouse a plan, because while he's a fantastic father and would do anything for his children, in an emergent situation, like if a house alarm were to go
I'm
off,
gonna train Jack.
No, I
that
know.
This is what he needs to
he
do.
hears it and he runs, and he tends to like run in circles because he doesn't know what to do with
Or
himself.
I go shut the alarm off.
And he runs to shut the alarm off,
Even
and in
though
the process,
you-
the fire alarm, recently, this happened about a month ago,
Actually, it did.
the house fire alarm went off when our children were sick. I happened to be sleeping downstairs with our youngest because she was so sick on the couch,
And
and
the
he
oldest
was upstairs.
sleeping with my oldest,
And he ran downstairs, and it was the fire alarm, and I was like,
I left
you
my
left your
oldest.
daughter upstairs, and the fire alarm was going off, so I ran upstairs, so now I have the children, but it's just his initial reaction. It happened in
So,
our old house as well.
to
He-
train Jack and Jill.
So I
Yeah,
know
well,
I have to go
exactly.
get
An
my
emergency.
kids.
Yeah.
No, so you run to it and you try to stop the whatever the issue is, and I run to the kids and get us to safety. And I
That's a
think
good
that's just
drill.
something
Yeah,
we've established, but that is something you do actually have to talk about, because I didn't always know that about him.
Similarly,
Right.
one of our kids set the alarm off in our house, like the security alarm, and Kristen immediately disarmed it. Like we didn't know it was.
That's what
but
you
that's
do.
your
We
It's
woke up
reaction.
and Kristen's like,
Stop,
turn
it's
everything
like
off, disable
loud and
everything.
We're gonna
But-
bother our neighbors.
Neighbors.
Why is it going off?
Right.
You're running
and you
to
do
the door.
after you sit there, after you're adrenaline, like,
Right.
but you're like, what?
Right.
There's a reason why it went off, and thank goodness it was an accident. Thank
Yeah.
goodness it was
Yeah.
a false alarm
Yeah.
and all that.
But then when you
Kid
thought
trying to sneak a
clearly,
snack
you
in
did
the
call,
middle of
because then our alarms just happened to be faulty. But you were smarter, where I was like, I'm sure they're just going off for no reason, because it was saying fire carbon monoxide, and he was like, I feel like if it's saying that, we should probably.
So
So he called the police, you know,
Yeah.
the whole
called
thing
the
came.
fire
Yeah.
department, and they came to check
And
it.
the kids were like freaking out, and we explained to them, but this is what you have to do. If you don't know what it is, you have to, you know.
Yeah.
And I
Especially
am.
something like carbon dioxide, like that would
Right,
freak me
right,
out. Being
yes.
like,
Then I found
Yes.
out
I was
that
like,
that's
let's
what
go to
the-
the door, breathe the air.
Right.
right.
But then I found out that the button, when you press it, it's the test. It tests it, and then it says warning carbon monoxide. That's all the test button. It didn't detect carbon monoxide.
But we didn't know.
But-
so
you know.
Yeah.
we learned.
Those are
Now the
safe.
kids have learned
Lesson
that.
learned.
So
So Jack and
You
Jill
kinda-
need to learn that.
You need to have an emergency
yes,
plan.
and
Emergency
to have your
plan.
own like we have.
So you're gonna buy a house.
Yeah.
Yes, buying a house is great, but what is going to be your protection for your house, and what's going to be your?
Because we have a 2-story house now. We used to live in a ranch. Now, as soon as we had the 2-story house, I bought us a fire ladder for the upstairs bedroom. Where initially he was like, "We have to have a ladder," and I said yes, because that was my thing, which you just go with because, and we have fire blankets in all the bedrooms, and it's just something that because I'm a little
Fire
more extra
extinguishers.
paranoid than maybe most, but in my head
Little
I know
things that you
how I'm
can
getting
prepare
everybody out.
for
Right.
hopefully
emergency.
Emergencies that
Yeah.
will never happen in your lifetime, but at least, and I think, and we.
You have to be
Same.
understanding. I think the point is you have to be understanding of each other's,
Right.
whether they're paranoias or whatever. You have to be on the same page with it too. Like, look, I may be crazy, but this is where the ladder is. This is where the blankets are. We
But
all need to
ultimately,
know.
it's protecting the household.
Right.
It's protecting yourselves,
Teaching your kids
teaching your kids.
a system.
Okay,
30
so
more
is there
minutes.
so before we leave security stuff, is there anything? And so you said join the military, become an EMT, a firefighter, a police officer. Short of professional life paths, can we think of anything?
I think realistically, to tell Jack and Jill, I think carving out the time to stop for a second, because life goes so crazy and this that, of this is the step you're gonna take the step to propose and you're gonna get married. There's gonna be some things that you should take
Iron out
into
beforehand.
iron out, take into consideration of, all right, it's not what TikTok and all these social media things, let's make this big review. this is a bigger picture. It's not just the moment in time that you're gonna post on things. So
it's not just for the likes and the shares.
Yeah. and
Sit and think about that.
So
like, okay,
so
how
the
are you
advice
in these
is
situations?
to stop for a moment and think about what your responsibility to bring to your marriage is going to be. And nowadays, and we don't do, but like we were just talking about, it's not so much a male female.
I think that's been a big shift, probably.
Yeah, a big shift.
I mean,
it's
obviously.
not just that anymore. It's what you guys can compromise, whose strengths are going to be brought to the table, and can we share part of it? And like you said, can co-pilot for some things, and because that's not my thing, or do I take charge because that's, and figuring that out at the beginning, so that you can sort of come up with a plan. So when we have an emergency in our house, what's going to happen? Because these are things that could happen. I don't think at 18 years old were you thinking of that.
Yeah,
but did anybody sit there and give you that advice?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, you have parents that are always trying to guide you, but
You're still in
if
that mindset
we
that
have
your
the
parents are gonna
opportunity
help
to
you.
run into Jack and Jill at the elevator and be like, yo, we got to talk to you for a few minutes. Here are these things that I think that food for thought going into your future is this could be a game changer in your relationship. So I think that would be a big thing, to take the time to stop and come up with the game plans of
The big things in life.
security and health and things like that. So
I love that. All right, let's segue into the next tier. We were physiological and safety needs. Now we're getting into, so those are our material resources. Those are what those correspond to. But family also serves the function of pooling emotional resources.
Oof.
Right?
So it's like emotional fulfillment, right? Like
I think it's like giving people the support that they need and helping them feel love and belonging. So having a sense of connection, a shared identity that comes with family and community, those things. So thinking about serving that need for all the members of their future family, trying to think how can you as a young person develop the ability, the maturity and your own sort of emotional well-being, so that when you do get married and have a family, you're able to create a loving, welcoming environment.
It's funny, actually, just recently, my friend told me that she has an ex-husband, they share a daughter, and they were talking about something that the daughter was going through, and he said to her, I don't worry about her emotions, that's your job. And he was very cut and dry. And yes, they're separated, so obviously there's a little bit more of an issue, but I feel like I can't imagine that would be a suggestion, recommendation, I guess, to Jack. Well, one, don't ever say that, because you both, if you're agreeing to have children together, I don't think you can separate. Okay, you're going to deal, maybe some things, of course,
very
does more than the
specific
other,
things maybe.
but I think you can very specifically pinpoint and say, I'm not dealing with emotions, good luck with that.
Right. That's very 1950s
Yes.
Stereotype,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
The father's
Yes.
I come
Like,
home from
oh,
work,
Mom,
I
yeah.
have my
You give
glass
me
of
my
whatever,
dinner,
I
yeah.
sit and I watch my show. You're in charge of the emotional development of the kids. And I think we've gone so far
Yes.
from that.
Yes.
Do you
So
think
to be
that's
in
for
that
good?
now, I think so, because I think life is so crazy now. You don't know, both parents are working. Who's home after school to hear about how their school day went and
Right.
help
There's
them
so
work
many-
through that, and all the emotions of life. I think if you never really
Emotions,
know, unless maybe
social anxieties and
yeah.
just development from social media and things like that, I think that doesn't affect just one, where just one parent should be involved in it. I think it's an understanding for both of them to really be able to, as we see struggles of that, being able to nurture, so the child doesn't always depend on one parent,
Right.
Right, because
I think-
emotions are constant. So if it was always you, and then you had to go away on a trip for a week for work,
Right.
you would never
what
be able
is Marcus
to.
going to be able to do for the week if he's not at least
Or a month.
somewhat into it? Right.
I mean, so again, is this a thing though? So if we are the cooking, I think we're all saying this isn't a thing where all food-related things can just be on one person. Both
Right.
people need to have some role and skill set
Yeah.
associated with this. But again, we can like the cooking thing, say, at least hypothetically, although apparently you're showing me up and you can bake, I can't bake. but like, it's something you can parse out, right? You can say, like, well, there's a lot of different things that go into like nutrition and cooking and health, like all those things. We can break it down and say, well, you can specialize in this and you can specialize in that, and between the two of you, like, everything will cover all the bases. Can you think about any ways that like love and belonging and emotional health has like subcomponents that you can say, well, like a father and a husband should really develop this sort of skill or propensity or attitude, and like a mother and wife should do.
So for Jack is to break down the stereotypes and don't go for that where dad has to be so
stoic, like
rigid, and this. Dad's allowed to cry, so like I've cried in front of my children so that they understand like it's okay. Yeah, it happens. Everybody has feelings. Because naturally that's life. Like, I'm not always going to be the strongest. Like, and I guess maybe that could be an issue because you always look at your father. And I know you both of you looked at your father as like so much higher up in the world.
Right.
But I think it's also good to teach your children that, we feel emotions.
That you're still safe to go to.
But that I think we're emotional as well. I think for me that's my personal opinion that that mom is nurturing as well, but I could be as nurturing. I think a kid has a different feeling with their parent, with their mother.
I think there's still some stereotypes, like girls, if our girls are dating or anything like that, I would imagine, maybe not, they would come to me, I would help them with that, I would comfort that with bedtime and just feeling
safe.
I think we've just established that as much as we both have that, that's, when they call someone in the middle of the night for that comfort, it's mom still. So I don't know, I mean, that may not be for everybody. I feel like in a lot of cases that's probably still.
I think like looking kind of back in time of like how can you prepare yourself. One thing I would say for both partners is to like take some time to sort out your baggage and like your upbringing, like what was good and what wasn't, and don't like you have to take time to do that. Like we have friends, for instance, who are like, I'm only having one kid. Why? Because my sister and I did not get along, and like that's how, and like so it's like, well, but like that was one situation, and like was that a result of parenting? Was that a result of like just the nature of that one sibling? Like, or similarly, like, oh well, my parents, like my father was this way and my mother was this way. Well, it doesn't mean you have to perpetuate that. Did that work? What worked about it and what didn't? And so I think like that, like kind of making sure that you are being self-examined about like what was positive and what was negative and what do you want to pass on to your children, because everybody has that, right? Like, I mean, I think honestly I have the best parents in the whole world. I think 90% of what they did, I'm like, you made the right choice every time. But like everybody has something with their parents that are like, I wish it was more this way or more that way. So both examining that, but then not overcompensating for it, where you're like, well, I wish my parents were more nurturing, so now I'm like way overbearing with my kids. Like, so I think that that's something
like recognizing your own, like not taking for granted that like you're seeing things clearly. It's almost like you're saying like double check yourself and like peel away at your own assumptions. Good. So then the next layer of like emotional resources is which in this crosswalks with like the marriage, like an essential element of marriage is that the spouses are giving each other mutual support, like in this emotional arena. And it specifically talks about the need for esteem, that you feel self-esteem, you feel like you are exercising like your individual freedom, but also that you feel respected by others and that like other people recognize your value. So that's like the next layer after feeling loved and feeling belonging is to feel esteem. So maybe let's start with like how you develop your like self-esteem as a young adult, like in preparation for like, so you're mature enough to get married and start a family. Like what advice would you give to a young Jack and Jill who are like trying to, I want to be in the right place to, have what I need so that I'm also able to support my spouse?
I mean, I think one thing to start with is, and this is where I think you and I differ a little bit, which is I feel like the self-esteem and like the maturity piece of this takes time. So like that's why I don't like when people are like, I'm getting married at 18 or 20. I'm like I think it's something like it's either 21 or 26 that your brain is still developing and like finalizing itself. So like you are not emotionally mature at 18. You're still all of the things that are kind of firing and whatever. And so my initial thought is just like you need to take the time to, and people come to it in different ways. Everybody's different, right? Like you guys actually got married much younger than we did. I think you both were like more mature at where you were and kind of knowing what you wanted and who you were. And so, but I think that's like kind of the key piece is like that self-esteem, like at 18, probably you're still questioning yourself and trying to figure it out.
But these two have 10 years to sort themselves out before they're going to get married.
Right. And so, but that's where I think like that is the part of like, you have to be a self-assured individual before you can seek a partner. You cannot seek that in the other person. Mm-hmm. They can amplify it. You want someone who is like supportive of you, but you can't look for fulfillment in the other person because you'll never find it.
It's going to backfire at some point.
Right.
Yeah, it might seem good at first, but it's going to come back.
Has that happened?
I said because they were
therapy begins.
This is actually an elaborate.
No, but I do. I think you're right. I think, unfortunately, at 18, they're gonna have to live experiences. They're gonna have to, unfortunately, life and situations are gonna have to happen for them to build their esteems, the confidence in who they are, what they're gonna bring. I think that's unfortunately time. So when you said at 18 years old, we don't particularly think someone should get married. First 25 years old, 26 years old, that's a big gap of so many life experiences. So if, stupid example, but at 18 you're still partying, you want to have fun and all that. Like, you're not thinking of
your future, mother of your children.
But at 20 something now, it's different because you can now look back and see other 18-year-olds and be like, oh wait, that's how I was, like. So I think you have to live those experiences to appreciate and understand those, to appreciate life and how you want to be and don't want to be, because you're seeing other people take those different paths.
Do you think that, like, this, we started off talking about like financial maturity and like becoming more independent and recognizing like taking seriously what the value of money and the value of like the things that you spend your money on, and like you one way to think about that is like, well, you can get better at that more and sooner by taking more responsibility earlier on. Do you think there's parallels when it comes to like your self-esteem and like sense of identity and your maturity?
Absolutely.
Like, what do you think people do in their young adulthood that drags out, like they're not maturing as quickly as they could, versus like, but if you do these things, you will like develop more maturity faster or more thoroughly, like, so you're in a better place, you are more mature earlier on. Can you think of things like that?
I think having your own responsibilities, not having, as much as maybe mom and dad are really great at, providing you with all these things, at some point at 18 you have to take on the responsibility of having a part-time job and knowing how to do laundry at college or pay for your own books in college, whatever it is, because otherwise then you're not really learning the value of something because you're just having it given to you.
Yeah.
I feel like that goes for money.
You're saying it bleeds over. It bleeds over into like your own self-esteem, also, not just the financial.
Yeah, because you feel good about yourself then. Like, okay, I can accomplish this,
and then it becomes a way to almost brag to others. Like, listen, like I'm going to school and taking so many credits. I'm working this job, and I feel like that's
you're building your esteem that way. Yeah.
And again, for good, you can look at it as good and bad, but social media, people want to better themselves because
just
that
to be able to post it,
and get those likes. But they're looking at other people and like, wait a minute, they're doing that. Well, I got to do that. I got to do better than that. So,
yeah.
I think like also not just living day to day. I think that's like something you do when you're 18, right? Like you're worried about like the here and now, like who likes me? What like am I? What am I gonna do today? Which friend am I gonna hang out with? Like, and I think that moving from that to like, if you want to be a very mature 20 something, like stopping to think about how you want to develop yourself, right? And like what kind of achievements you do want to have. Like maybe it is like, you know, maybe from a volunteering perspective, like being able to give back to the community is really important to you. That builds a sense of esteem. And so I think like stopping to like kind of map out like what are the important things and the, you know, characteristics that you want to develop in yourself. And we've talked about some of them based on like being a good spouse and things, but what is it that you want to build, and how can you, like, think about how you can get there versus like the thought of like, I'm in my 20s, like I'm just gonna like live my best life. You should still do that. You should still have have fun, but like keeping in mind that there are probably some like you want to have like a destination in mind. Like what are the things I want to accomplish and do.
And then the flip. So we've been talking about like self-esteem. The flip side of it is being able to show like respect and recognition for the other person, your spouse, and for that matter, like giving recognition and respect to your children and other members of the family. So I don't know if there's things that like help form that like character or habit before you get married. The first thing that jumps to my mind is almost like, and these might seem like their intention, but I think that in addition to developing like your self-esteem and like being proud of like your accomplishments, there's also like having enough humility where you're not like in competition. Like you're like, oh, you did this thing now, like I gotta one up you. It's like, I'm happy for you. Like that's great that you did that. And also I feel good about myself enough to I don't have to like knock you down to feel good about me kind of stuff.
Right.
So I feel like there's like a humility piece as well as like an esteem piece. But
I mean, I think part of it is like, I think that this piece goes back so much more to your upbringing and your parents, right? Like a lot of how we interact and my, like the way in which I am supportive of you is because of the way I watched my parents be supportive of each other. And always speaking positively of one another and kind of like talking each other up and really just being each other's, you know, support and cheerleader, for lack of a better term. So I think part of it is like, it's like the product of your upbringing. Not to say you can't overcome if you did not come from that. But I think that'd probably be one, like it's like a very, for me, like it's from like as long as I can remember, right? Just how my parents were together. Yeah.
I think it's just be present.
Interesting.
I think just be present. I think it's very easy to, you know, let that one handle it, or let me, and not intentional. It's just it just becomes what you're thinking at that time.
You're like absorbed in your own stuff.
Yep. So I think being present and doing what you could to be involved with the scenario, whether or not your kid might not want you, but you're going to do everything you can to show your partner that I'm there to be there for it, but they still want you, you know, like that's support, that sort of your children knowing that I'm putting out there, I'm there for you. I think it just being present there, you know, I think is an important thing, because I can tell her all the, you know, as in the marriage, you can be like, I'm going to be there for you, but if you're not there, if you're not, you know, and we talk about some of our struggles that we're very fortunate with. We have and we work very well in that sense of we have our on moments and off moments. When she's on, I'm off. When I'm off, she's on. And it literally is like, all right, I've got the patience right now. I got this one. And it's like, I literally am out. No more. No more. It's like, I got this, you know, and but it's not like we talk about it. It's just like this connection of knowing, but I think knowing that we're willing to be present,
having the confidence
and having
in each
that
other,
confidence to be there, because there, the scenarios that are dealt, sometimes you don't want to be present, you know, but you got to be present to be there, and hopefully it all works out.
Hopefully. That's all the time we have for today. For the director's cut and behind-the-scenes content, visit us on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon. When we pick this thread up again, we'll pull all these principles and lessons learned into one or two specific strategies for young men to consider as they better prepare to be husbands and fathers. Until next time, happy homemaking.
thank you so much for attending today's discussion with Mr. Homemaker. Please take this opportunity to subscribe, like, and share this episode with your spouse, relatives, and friends. We further invite you to access complimentary information and resources at our website, mr-homemaker.com. There you will also find links to join the discussion via email or social media. And please, support the Mr. Homemaker podcast and receive merchandise and membership benefits on patreon.com. Until next time, farewell.